Hey there, I'm Benita Prins, author of Starscape. I live in Canada, so if you see me shivering, now you know why. I was born in Calgary, Alberta, where there's snow for most of the year and the rest of it is basically construction. But I've lived in Ontario for most of my life, where the weather isn't quite so crazy. I grew up with 8 siblings and a used bookseller for dad, so in our family we were never short of books or stories. We probably own over 1,000 books all told. Maybe it was all that reading that made me so shy, but when I was little, I would never talk to anyone outside our family if I could possibly help it, and I wouldn't have answered the phone for the world. I've gotten over that finally, but I'm still better at writing than at talking. So I started writing when I was very young, probably 6 or 7. My first story was about Lucy Larson. It was a pretty boring story from what I remember. I really don't remember much of it, but I do remember that she went blind in one chapter, and in the next chapter she had an operation to restore her sight. I remember illustrating it with stick figures. So by the time I had gotten into my teens, I had finished quite a few books, and it was then that I got serious about writing, but it was still a few years before I published my first novel. I feel like I've told this story way too many times. Well, when my best friend and I were in our mid-teens, we were huge Lord of the Rings nerds. I still love Lord of the Rings. So she was over, and at this point we had a habit of creating epic fantasy adventures in our heads. So Bridget was telling me about one of hers, and in it, she was a mysterious, brooding woman who appeared in the midst of the Fellowship. When asked by Legolas why she was so melancholy, Bridget's character said, "It's who I am and who I'm supposed to be." When she repeated that line to me, it struck a chord, and I conceived the idea for Starscape. It kind of the book started as a really glorified Lord of the Rings fan fiction. It was pretty much the same plot and the same characters, just with different names and everything. So I finished that. It kind of branched out into its own story eventually, but it was still very Lord of the Rings, not original at all. But a couple of years later, I'd finished the first 2 drafts, and I got the idea, why don't I change this story completely? So I basically did that. I started writing, and it came out so much different, and I loved it. I write mainly at my laptop, sometimes on my bed where I can get comfortable under a blanket, but I always find it easier to concentrate when I sit at my desk because I guess it feels more like work. I always listen to music, or nearly always, when I'm writing. When I wrote Starscape, it was the Lord of the Rings and the Narnia film soundtracks. But for my work in progress, Seascape, I've been listening to Two Steps from Hell, which I hate that name. But anyways, they do epic music, a lot from movie trailers, and if you're a fantasy writer looking for music to write to, I really recommend checking them out. So I'm a huge music person. I love classical and baroque, so music really helps me to put more 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 heart into the scene. Most of the best parts of my work are written to music. My favorite genre would probably be either fantasy or historical fiction. I love Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, of course, and I've discovered some other amazing fantasies, but I don't actually read that much of the genre. I've loved historical fiction practically my whole life. In fact, it was Little House on the Prairie that inspired my first writing efforts. But I would read anything classical like Jane Austen. I love Jane Austen. I would have loved to live back then. It's always hard to answer what I'm reading right now because I tend to have a lot of books going at the same time. I guess mainly I'm reading P.G. Wodehouse right now. He wrote comedy in the early 20th century, and if you've ever watched the Jeeves and Wooster TV show, he's responsible for those characters. Woodhouse was a master of the English language, and I'm not exaggerating in the least. He always makes me laugh, no matter how many times I've read the story. The Jeeves stories are the best, but all of his work is brilliant. So, like I said, my work in progress is Seascape, and it's nearly done. Now, it's not a sequel to Starscape, long story, but I really liked the sound of Starscape, so I came up with a bunch of titles ending in scape. When I started my new story, Seascape just fit. My main character is a teenage boy named Einar, whose little sister is the most precious thing in his life. But in a world where children are sacrificed weekly to the great Achiel, it's not a great idea to care too much. So when Chiron appears, it's a matter of moments for Einar to agree to the old man's outline of how the cult of the great Achiel can be destroyed. While Steiner has really been growing on me as his character arc progresses, Lodi is my absolute favorite character. I never had a baby sister. I've got two who are just a couple years younger than I am, but I never had a baby sister, and she's such a sweetheart that she's kind of like a baby sister to me. My favorite little piece of advice to hand around is dare to put your soul on the page. It's really hard to bear that much of yourself to strangers, but it's really what gives your characters and your story life. And I also like to contradict that piece of advice that says to read what's selling in your genre and then write what's going to sell. That makes me so furious. Write your story, not anyone else's. It doesn't matter what they think. Now, it is a good idea to read in your genre and get a feel for how it's written, but in the end, you have to write your story in your voice. Nothing else is going to work. Would you rather time? Let's see. Books or movies? Books, of course. Dogs or cats? Dogs. I don't know why I just like cats. Maybe it's something to do with Lucy Maud Montgomery, Anne of Green Gables, and her obsession with gray cats. For some reason, it just really bugs me. But anyways, dogs for sure. Summer or winter? Summer. Cake or ice cream? That is hard, but I think cake. I mean, ice cream freezes your teeth. Have you ever gotten it on your bottom teeth? Blech. Anyways, car or motorcycle? I've never been on a motorcycle, but I kind of feel like I wouldn't like it very much, so car. Ebook or physical book? No contest. Physical book. Nights out or nights in? Don't get very many nights out, but I always prefer nights in. Living in the city or in the country? Well, if I had to choose between just those two, it would be in the country, but my favorite place to live is in a small town. It, you're not too far from the city, and you can run to the store quickly to get like milk or whatever you need if you're baking and you run out of something, but I would never want to live in the city. Having telepathy or telekinesis? Telepathy. Being able to travel to the past or to the future? To the past. Making a phone call or sending a text? Well, if I know them, I would probably tend to say phone call, but if I don't know them, I still hate talking to strangers, so I'd probably just want to send a text or an email. Traveling by car or by airplane? When I was little, I loved traveling by airplane, but last time I was a little older and I was terrified the whole time that the plane was going to crash. So is car for me. And you can see so much more that way too. Staying in a hotel or going camping? Going camping. I mean, just think how many people have used that room. That's just weird. Working in a group or alone? Alone. Losing all of your money or losing every picture you've ever taken and every picture that's ever been taken of you? I would tend to say all the photos, but maybe I'd rather lose all my money because some of my pictures are really precious to me. To find true love or to win the lottery? Find true love. Being Spider-Man for the day or being Batman for the day? I have never actually watched any of those superhero movies. I'm not into them at all, so I have no idea, but if I have to choose between two of them, Batman, because Spider-Man's uglier.